Hello, and welcome to Uberstudios. I am your host for today and probably forever, EXMORMON. We'll get into what that name means, why I chose it, who Friedrich Nietzsche is, and what it means to be an Uber-Mormon. But that's not really the plan for the day. The plan for today, and I'm really excited about it, and it's going to take a lot longer than today, is I'm going to react to every live-action Book of Mormon production by the Mormon Church. What a behemoth of a project. I want to set some guidelines, give some context, not set predictions, but maybe give let's look ahead for a second and let's figure out what exactly the purpose of this really is. A lot of people who are way smarter than me have already figured out that the Book of Mormon is not true. A lot of people who are way smarter than me have essentially shown the Book of Mormon to be not true. And they've done this through DNA and figuring out who the Lamanites actually were. Simon Southerton did a lot of work on that. And then there's just the whole, could this continent be populated that quickly? Is it even true that that's how people immigrated here? Could somebody build a boat? I know that John Larson did a lot of, he talked about building boats and transatlantic vessels or whatever he would call that. A lot of people who are way smarter than me have essentially shown that the Book of Mormon is not true. But I want to go after a different premise. I want to go after the premise that is often disseminated within the LDS Church. Anybody who's ever been Mormon knows this premise, and it will sound familiar to you. We hear so often that not only is it a great spiritual book, not only does it testify of Jesus, and not only is it factually true, but it's also just a great piece of literature. How many of us have heard that? And that's garbage. It's such a bad book. And I'll give you an example of how I know this. I'll prove to you that the Book of Mormon is boring. Other than the fact that Mark Twain called it chloroform in print, how many of us as teenagers were at church and our bishop was constantly railing on us every Sunday, you need to read 15 minutes a day? How many of us got that message? How many people need to be told every week to go at home and read a good book? How many times did your bishop have to tell you, hey guys, I really need you to read Harry Potter this week. Nobody's reading this great book. It's such a good book, but nobody reads it. I mean, if nobody reads it, is it a good book? I don't know. So I want to steelman this argument. I want to steelman the idea that the Book of Mormon is not a good piece of literature. Even though it's not true, so it's not nonfiction, it's not even good fiction. It's just a bad book all around. Everybody knows it. People are lying to themselves who think it's a good book. I'm coming off way hotter than I meant to, but here we go. So I'm going to steelman this. I'm going to steelman this by watching these incredibly well-produced, incredibly expensive, incredibly high production value videos that were released by the church, I think starting back in 2019. They started with First Nephi, and so we're going to watch First Nephi. We're going to see, hey, if this were a movie, to make a movie, you need a film crew, you need some actors, you need a script, you need a set. You can make a movie with that. Now, some filmmakers, some script writers, some actors only make the best. And some only make kind of weird stuff. And then what's going on here is you have a bunch of really talented people, a bunch of really good cinematographers, a bunch of really good sound people. You have a bunch of pretty good actors. The only actor who I think is a little weird to watch, kind of seems a little robotic, he plays Layman. He's not that great, but I actually blame that entirely on the script because it comes across really robotic. And he's not in charge of the script, it's not his fault that it's written poorly. So we're gonna steelman this idea. We're gonna look at these incredibly well-produced videos released by the church, and we're gonna ask ourselves, with everything else pretty much as good as you could hope it would be, Does it help the fact that the story is garbage? We will find out. I'm Uber Mormon. Oh man, that was a long intro. But yeah, let's do this thing. Okay, so we're in my computer screen now. I'm in Final Cut. I've chopped this video up a little bit so that it's not so, how do I say this? Boring? It's really boring. I would not, this is 18 minutes long. I've sped everything up to 120%, and then I've cut a few things out, and then we'll still skip a lot of it. This is hard to watch. If I had to watch 90 minutes of this, which I do, by the way, I would not be a happy boy in the theater. We'll just say that. So we start with this screen, just the quick synopsis, and I have to make a point about what is on the screen right now. Based on actual events as recorded in the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. You could put any title of any book, you at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings movies, you could put based on actual events as recorded in the Fellowship of the Ring. And the reason you could do that is because of this qualifying language right here. As recorded in, come on guys, as recorded in, that's qualifying language. So essentially you can't, because they can't say based on actual events from the Book of Mormon, because it's not true, right? So you have to qualify it. I don't know. That sticks out like a red flag to me. Do you think it sticks out? Am I reaching? Talk to me. Okay. And then we're going to skip a lot. Boring. Actually, pretty well done there, but okay. Amazing set. This is funny. Okay, so now our hero, Lehi. Now, look, drunk people, even though, yeah, so drunk people, idols, they're selling idols right there. And now we're going to see evil, lustrous temptations of women. Right? This is such an evil place. The church doesn't know how else to show evil other than women being temptations. Get better, Mormon church. Women are a lot more than that. So we're going to have women. Ooh. And then this is a weird scene, okay? So she stops him and she's like being all, she's trying to tempt him or whatever. What is that laugh? Okay, that's wrong. Shouldn't be selling kids into slavery. They got one right. Out of the 4 things that they've shown that are evil in Jerusalem, that are the reason that Jerusalem is going to fall, they got one right so far.
Jerusalem, ye must repent, for the great city Jerusalem must be destroyed. O Jerusalem, wash thy heart from wickedness. Destruction upon destruction is cried, for the whole land is spoiled. For thus hath the Lord said, the whole land shall be desolate.
So I don't actually remember this part in the Book of Mormon. I remember it starts with Lehi is walking around and then receives this revelation, and then decides that him and his family need to leave because Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. I don't remember him just copying somebody else's revelation. So I have like a couple things could be going on here. This could be very Freudian. The church could have subconsciously shown that revelations are always copied from other sources, and we'll actually get to that later because the LDS Church, I think I can make the case that the LDS Church has never had an original revelation. But do you remember this? Like he just is walking around in the city and then somebody else has his revelation and then he goes home and steals it? I don't know. This is weird. And he immediately believes in two.
Please hear the words of thy servant Lehi. The heart of thy servant aches at the souls of thy children in Jerusalem.
So 0 critical thinking was applied. He hears a guy in the street who other people are mocking saying Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, immediately gets sad. Now I know this is a reenactment, right? But we're judging the fiction of it, right? We're judging whether it's good. I'm not buying this so far. You don't just believe the first guy on the street who says this is going to happen. Sorry, those people are usually a little bit crazy. But he bought in.
Fear terrible
Blind and
destruction
sinker.
awaits
Zero
them if they
critical
will
thinking.
not turn their hearts from wickedness.
Okay.
Blessed art thou, Lehi, because of thy faith.
Now we're supposed to believe. Do any of you know anybody who has ever had something like that happen to them? I know this is probably like a really like moot point. Like it's probably a little bit too abstract. It's probably too silly to even actually analyze and criticize. But like, has anybody ever seen that happen to them? Are we just supposed to believe that it happened all the time for years and years and years, and then some time passed and now no one has ever had that happen? And the only people who have had it happen are like usually killing people with Kool-Aid in the basement somewhere. Like, I don't know. Now we get introduced to Nephi.
Nephi, please, take him. See to it quickly.
Yes, Father. Father, are you well?
Yes, thank you.
This script is so good. Are you well? I wish they had modernized the language a little bit.
What has happened?
Yeah, don't let women in on the revelations, guys. They are temptations. Don't you remember from the beginning? They're not equals in the marriage, right? They're subordinate to the husband. So okay, now he's gonna have another vision.
My sons, the Lord spoke unto me. After returning from Jerusalem, I was overcome with the Spirit. I was carried away in a vision, even that I saw the heavens open, and I saw God sitting on his throne.
Okay, so we have Nephi, no beard.
I saw one descending out of
Look
the
at
midst of
the
heaven.
subliminal messaging here. And
And
Lehi
his
has
luster.
a beard, but he has like light hair. And this guy, he's played a lot of people in a lot of church films. He has a very soft face. White hair, right? So more like how we see God in images, or how we like expect to see Jesus, right? So beard, but light. I'm probably killing that
It was
point.
above that of the sun at noonday. And I also saw 12 others.
We have Sam right here.
And the first
Okay,
came
so
to
I think
before
this
me.
is layman. So dark beard, right? So watch the subliminal messaging here. Because we have two good brothers and two evil brothers, right? And let's just ask ourselves, what is the messaging that the church is pushing as far as appearance goes for the good guys and the bad
Gave unto me a
guys?
book. As I read, I was filled with the Spirit of the Lord.
Oh, sorry. The other guy was
Many things did I
Lemuel.
read
This
concerning Jerusalem.
is layman.
That it should be destroyed.
What does the Lord want us to do?
Great and marvelous are the works of the Lord God Almighty. I know that he will not suffer those who come unto him to perish. He has commanded me to declare the things I have seen and heard to the people of Jerusalem.
So he's like, guys, I was in the market the other day and there was this guy standing on the stairs preaching, and he looked super cool. Everybody was focused on him, and he was telling him all this stuff, and he was totally prophesying, and it gave me this super original, unique idea that today I'm going to go to the town square, and I am going to stand up there, and I'm going to do the same thing. It's a revelation.
I know that he will not suffer those who come unto him to perish. He has
All
commanded
these
me
scenes
to
are
declare
too
the things I
long.
have
We
seen
don't
and
need a
heard
reaction shot from
to the
every
people
person.
of Jerusalem.
Condense it. All right, here we go.
People of Jerusalem, I am Lehi. I have dwelt at Jerusalem all my days. I am a man who fears God. I have had a vision. Even that I saw the heavens open, and I saw God sitting upon his throne.
That seems, I mean, if that's your vision, cool, but like, get to the relevant part for the people you're talking to. He's like, hey, everybody, I talked to God yesterday. He had a super important message for all of you. He was in a, let me just set the context here. I think he had just gotten out of the shower, and his wife was on the phone, but he was just holding it right here, and he was like, I'll be with you in just 1 second. Actually, no, yes, that sounds great for dinner. Make it now. And what else was going on? Oh yeah, so then he put on his shoes, and then he started tying his shoes, and then we started talking about, so there was a soccer game the other night, and we were talking about how okay, so he's like giving way too much, like, this is weird, right? He's sitting here, blah, 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 blah. Just get to the part that's relevant for the people you're talking to, man. Like, concise.
I have seen many things concerning Jerusalem, that it shall be destroyed, and the inhabitants thereof. You are a fool! Many shall perish by the sword, and many shall be carried away captive into Babylon, and this because of the wickedness and the abominations of the people of Jerusalem. You should perish by the sword. There is a Messiah coming who will redeem the world. He speaks blasphemy. He speaks the truth. Slay him. Slay him. Please listen.
That's all I can handle. There's still like another 8 minutes, and I've shortened it, but nothing else happens. It's them walking with camels for so long. And Nephi praying about his dad's revelation, and then his dad saying, and then an angel saying, yes, your dad's revelation is true. So essentially, this is like 18 minutes of nobody having an original revelation, which is kind of fun. And does anybody else, so here's something that strikes me, right? Lehi goes to the town square. We don't know how it ended with the other prophet, right? I assume maybe the people did the same thing to that prophet that they did to Lehi. I'm saying prophet, you should air quotes or something. But the persecution complex, you can really see Joseph Smith's worldview of how he sees himself coming through in Lehi here. Because to me, and I'm reading into this, right? So bear with me. But to me, it's like, people don't get stoned, and people don't get persecuted, and people don't get like threatened with murder when they just like say that they saw a thing and they think it's true, right? If J.K. Rowling came out tomorrow and said, hey everybody, I just want you to know that every single word in every single Harry Potter book was literally true, and it actually happened, and it's historical, people would be like, okay, you seem crazier than we remember, but I mean, thanks for the books, because they were fun to read, and the movies were pretty awesome, and kind of like the whole like universe was kind of fun to lose ourselves in the early 2000s. So like, I mean, you kind of went a little crazy there at the end, but like, thanks for the art you created. I think that's what would happen if J.K. Rowling today said that she thought that Harry Potter was an actual revelation and it actually happened. But you see this like magical persecution complex worldview that Joseph Smith has about himself, that whenever you tell people the truth, they kill you. And he's probably pulling from like at the end of his life, at the end of the story in the Bible, when Jesus says, you'll be hated and persecuted for my sake, the world will hate you, you'll be rejected of men. When all of that is being said, I'm sure, because, Joseph Smith was really steeped in this like kind of fire and brimstone-y culture that was going on in Palmyra. That was just kind of like Christianity and Protestantism kind of just in that era anyways. And so it's not surprising that we're seeing this worldview kind of seep into the text of the Book of Mormon, but it's a very old almost dated way of thinking, and I think that it does show us something about the psychology of the author. Now I want to go back to something that we talked about earlier when we were talking about the kind of the Freudianism of why is the church showing us that Lehi is copying somebody else's religion? Are they subconsciously saying that we know that this is the real way that revelations happen, that actual prophets see the future and then they get copied by people who throw their own spin on it? Or are they being purposefully meta? And I don't think it's the first one. I mean, I don't think it's the second one, sorry. I would like to jump into, I've made some slides, so I want to jump into this right here. There are there are three examples of somebody having the first vision before Joseph Smith. And I want to read those accounts and I want to tell you what the dates are. And then I want to talk about the problems with the actual first vision that we know and love. Okay, so first we're going to jump into the story of Norris Stern. This was an account that was written down in 1815. This is what Norris Stern said. And I'm sorry, I don't remember where he was. I should have looked into that. I'm just now realizing that I didn't. He says, I saw two spirits, which I knew at first sight. But if I had the tongue of an angel, I could not describe their glory. For they brought the joys of heaven with them. One was God, my maker, almost in bodily shape like a man. His face was, as it were, a flame of fire. A flame of fire, that sounds like Doctrine and Covenants language to me. And his body, as it had been a pillar on a cloud. In looking steadfastly to discern features, I could see none, but a small glimpse would appear in some other place. Below him stood Jesus Christ, my Redeemer, in perfect shape like a man. His face was not ablaze, but had a countenance of fire, being bright and shining. His Father's will appeared to be his. All was condescension, peace, and love. So here are a couple things. Do you remember hearing that Joseph Smith was a revolutionary? And part of the proof that he was a prophet was that he was pulling out this Godhead, two separate beings idea before it was popular in mainstream Christianity. Do you remember hearing that as a Mormon? Because Norris Stern actually beats him to it. Norris Stern is saying that God and Jesus Christ both have their own bodies and that he saw both of them individually. And this happened 5 years before Joseph Smith claimed to have the first vision. Let's go to the next one. The story of Elias Smith 1 year after Norris Stern. He said, I went into the woods. A light appeared from heaven. My mind seemed to rise in that light to the throne of God and the Lamb. The Lamb once slain appeared to my understanding. And while viewing him, I felt such love to him as I had never felt to anything earthly. It is not possible for me to tell how long I remained in that situation. Okay, so this is 4 years before Joseph Smith claimed to have the first vision. A note that I would like to make here in the sake for the cause of intellectual honesty here, I don't like that this quote has ellipses in it. I tried really hard to find the original source so that I could read through the ellipses because I know how the LDS church hides a lot of things in ellipses, but I wasn't able to do that. So I'm sorry. It does say what the source is. I found it and I put it, but I wasn't able to actually track down those pages and read it. So my bad. Number 3, the story of Asa Wilde. It seemed as if my mind was struck motionless, as well as into nothing, before the awful and glorious majesty of the great Jehovah. Then he spake. He also told me that every denomination of professing Christians had become extremely corrupt. This is a very interesting quote, and I'll tell you why. This was released in a weekly edition of a newspaper that is called the Wayne Sentinel. This was released October 22nd, 1823. The Wayne Sentinel was a Palmyra publication. So it is very likely, because there wasn't that much media out there at the time, and you couldn't just like get the newspaper from the other town, right? And Joseph Smith family lived in Palmyra. So we can pretty safely assume that Joseph Smith had either read this in the Palmyra weekly paper, whatever. He would have been, 18, 17 when this came out. So it's very likely that he read this or knew somebody who had read this. So let's just go over what is similar between Asa Wilde's quote and statement here and what Joseph Smith will later say. It seemed as if my mind was struck motionless. So he kind of talks about like that dumbness that Joseph Smith talks about, although not in his handwritten account, but we'll get there. He spake and told me that every denomination of professing Christians had become extremely corrupt. So, he just, he gave it first. So 3 people who gave it first. And now let's get to the interesting thing about Joseph Smith's first vision, because you'll notice here, Asa Wilde's account is 1823. And maybe if some of you have done the math by now, you're thinking, wait a second, 1823, but Joseph Smith had the first vision in 1820, so this guy isn't first. Well, except for the fact that Joseph Smith didn't actually write down his account of the first vision, and so therefore we can't actually believe that it happened until 1832. And so we would probably want to ask ourselves, why would somebody see God and Jesus in the woods and have them tell you something so earth-shattering and gobsmacking and then wait 12 years to write it down? That seems really weird, unless you somehow needed more attention on a book that you had written 2 years ago that you were kind of trying to sell to make money so that your family could get out of poverty. I don't know. These are just thoughts off the top of my head. This is the only handwritten account by Joseph Smith. This is from a chapter in the CES letter. And while in the attitude of calling upon the Lord in the 16th year of age, a pillar of firelight above the brightness of the sun at noonday come down from above and rested upon me, and I was filled with the Spirit of God, and the Lord opened the heavens unto me. And I saw the Lord, and he spake unto me, saying, Joseph, my son, thy sins are forgiven thee. Go thy way, walk in my statutes, and keep my commandments. Behold, I am the Lord of glory. I was crucified for the world, that those who believe on my name may have eternal life. Okay. There's only one person here. That's the first problem. If he was such a revolutionary in having the first vision that went totally contrary to mainstream Christianity because he saw 2 people instead of 1, let me ask you something. Why is the only version of this in his own handwriting, why does it not mention a second being? Why does it only mention one being? Was his theology evolving over time across the different accounts? Maybe. Why is this, I've already covered this, why is this 12 years after 1820? Why didn't he write it immediately? Why is there no account of Joseph's in the Wayne Centennial that he had also had a vision? They were clearly publishing these, right? Why is he 15 instead of 14 in this account? Right? Here he says, I was in the 16th year of my age, which is 15, where the normal account that we know in the LDS Church is that he was 14. Why is he not asking which church to join? And why is there no description of being attacked by Satan? Weird things. Was Joseph Smith having an original revelation, or was he copying revelations that he may have heard about before? Okay, now I found another example, and I'm not going to get too far into this, but I found another example of a time when the LDS Church was probably not having a true revelation, but was probably copying another revelation, or was falling prey to the social pressures of their time. And for the good of the church in this case, actually, but still a little weird that prophets are this far behind. So I found an article where a black student union at the University of Wyoming actually protested before having to play BYU in some sort of football game. And the reason I have one paragraph that I just thought was kind of interesting. It kind of shows that BYU is not well liked by the surrounding schools. And this could have been one of the reasons that suddenly they had a revelation that the African American members can now have the priesthood, go to the temple, and receive all the necessary blessings to be saved. Well, black athletes' protest was big news on UTEP campus. BYU's record of racism and discrimination did not become national news until the fall of 1969. So BYU's record of racism became national news? Interesting. When 14 black football players at Wyoming were suspended from the football team for planning to protest against BYU. Now, doesn't this seem like the kind of thing that would make the church's PR department say, hey, we need to change our ways because we're starting to get a bad name? Doesn't that seem more likely than God waiting until 1978 to be like, I totally forgot that I actually do love those people too. I don't know how it slipped my mind. I was so worried about don't drink hot drinks and tobacco's only for cows. And oh my God, I'm so sorry. God wouldn't say, oh my God, he would have said oh my me or something. But this seems more like the flow of events, Anyway, the University of Wyoming's successful football team had 14 black players recruited from around the nation. Their coach, Lloyd Eaton, was known as a disciplinarian and had a strict policy against his students protesting. On October 15th, 1969, 3 days before the game with BYU, the Black Student Alliance at the University of Wyoming delivered a letter to the university's administration. The letter discussed the racial policies of the LDS Church, and BYU suggested that students and players protest in the upcoming game. The 14 blacks on the team met, and while unsure of the tactics they would use, decided to protest the LDS Church's doctrine. The specific issue that the athletes were protesting was a Mormon church policy that prohibited blacks from joining the priesthood. In the Mormon church, the priesthood is not a professional order, and all males entered in the priesthood at the age 12. Without being allowed into the priesthood, blacks could not marry in the temple, hold important leadership positions in the church, or enter the highest level of heaven. In short, Mormon doctrine viewed blacks as spiritually inferior. And that actually is true. They did view them as spiritually inferior. If you've read anything that Brigham Young said about the reason that he would talk about blood atonement and some of the examples that he would give where blood atonement was necessary. If you don't know what blood atonement is, it's where you commit a sin. It's so bad that actually Jesus' atonement won't cover it. And so you have to die also, and you have to be laid in your blood. Because blood is awesome, and you have to be laid in your blood, and then that plus Jesus's blood makes you healed, and then you can go to heaven. So he taught that if a black man were to lay with a white woman, then they would both need to be blood atoned. Yay! So yeah, definitely view them as spiritually inferior, as well as physically and just as human beings inferior. So that's awesome. Now, this is what Bruce R. McConkie said after the policy on African Americans was changed in 1978. You say such and such. And how is it now that we do such and such? I love the vague, he's no longer going to say what the criticisms are. He's no longer going to say you guys think that this is wrong, but it's not. But he's not going to be specific about what this is, because then the people who don't know what it is years later don't have any ammunition. They don't have any way of learning what it is. And the church does this now. In a recent episode of General Conference, Dieter F. Uchtdorf made comments about how we have not always been perfect. And that's nice of him to say, but that's way too vague. We need specific apologies so that we know that they were wrong. And all I can say, okay, so back into the quote, right? You say such and such, and how is it now that we do such and such? All I can say to that is that it is time disbelieving people repented and got in line and believed in a living modern prophet. Forget everything I have said, or what President Brigham Young or President George Q. Cannon or whomsoever has said in days past that is contrary to the present revelation. So let me ask you a question. If you're now saying, I was wrong 5 minutes ago. The second president of the church was wrong, and George Q. Cannon was wrong, right? Forget everything they've said. How are you supposed to know if you are in one of those times that needs to be forgotten about in the future, right? And how is that fair to people? How can you say, listen to me, always me, even when I contradict myself, just forget the old thing and believe the new thing? Well, how is that fair? Like, are people going to need, is it going to be like most of the church was in apostasy again because they were wrong for so long that we have to do baptisms for the dead for the people who were alive during Brigham Young's time? Like, is that what it's going to come down to when we're all in the millennium doing all that work for the dead? This doesn't make any sense. It falls apart under the weight of its own logic. I'm going to continue. We spoke with limited understanding. I thought you were prophets. And without light and knowledge that we now has come to the world. Then if you don't have light and knowledge, A, how could you know that? How can you know what you don't know? And second of all, why are you talking if you're missing so much? We get our light and truth. We get our truth and our light line upon line, precept upon precept. So could we just like skip to the end so that God could tell us all of the stuff that we need to know and we could forget all of this bad stuff? That seems like a way better way for him to save his kids. And it erases all the darkness and all the views and all the thoughts of the past. They don't matter anymore. They sure did matter when Brigham Young was saying you need to know this or you won't be able to be saved. I don't know, but now they don't matter anymore, right? So he's just gaslighting everybody. It doesn't make any particle of difference what anybody ever said about the Negro matter before the first day of June this year. So how long does it take for everything to become one of these issues? That's my question. How long before the church says, it doesn't make a difference whether the Book of Mormon is true or not. It's a spiritual book. Just read it and feel good. Like, how long does it take before everything that made the LDS church different is now old news and we can't believe it anymore? I feel like it's getting here pretty quick. And it's not because these men are original thinkers who really are speaking to some sort of bearded supreme being out there in Kolob. I think that they realize that they are falling behind and they're playing catch up. One more thing that I want to go over. Actually, two more things that I want to go over. One, another source that maybe could have been copied, but probably wasn't. I am reading from the CES letter. I am on page 22. We're going to talk about all the ways that View of the Hebrews and the original version of the Book of Mormon are similar to one another, and what questions they're answering, and what questions they are asking. They're not answering any questions, just in case you were wondering. So both of these, so View of the Hebrews, the first edition was written in 1823, and Book of Mormon, the first edition, was written and published in 1830. So the Book of Mormon is 7 years late. Now, these are all the topics that they cover, and I am going to read every single one of these, and there are 2 pages of them, so bear with me. And I'm sorry that I'm sniffling. The destruction of Jerusalem, they both cover it. The scattering of Israel, the restoration of the 10 tribes. Hebrews leave the old world for the new world. Religion is a motivating factor. Migration is a long journey. Encounter sea of, quote, many waters. The Americas are an uninhabited land. The church tries to disagree with the fact that the Book of Mormon talks about that, but that is, in fact, what the Book of Mormon claims. Settlers journey northward. Encounter a valley of a great river. Unity of race. Hebrew settled the land and are the ancestral origin of the American Indians. Hebrew is the origin of the Indian language. Egyptian hieroglyphics. Lost Indian records. Breastplate, Urim and Thummim. Prophets, spiritually gifted men transmit generational records. A man standing on the wall saying to the people, saying, woe, woe into the city, while subsequently being attacked. It's weird that both of these books talk about all of this stuff. The gospel is preached in Americas, quotes whole chapters of Isaiah. Good and bad are necessary opposition. Pride is denounced. Polygamy is denounced. Sacred towers and high places. Messiah visits the Americas. I I think it's pronounced Quetzalcoatl is the if you Google Quetzalcoatl, you'll get like a white savior in Mexico who many people now believe was actually Jesus. Idolatry and human sacrifice. Hebrews divide into two classes: civilized and barbarous. Civilized thrive in art, written language, and metallurgy and navigation. Government changes from monarchy to republic. This is just guys in the early 1800s who are like, America's always been free, even from the beginning. That like these are just guys in the 1830s who are just projecting back to civilizations that they have no right talking about, what they think it's like because of how it is now. Not only is it not a very intuitive argument, because we know that things were different back then, so why would we look back and assume that they were the same? But like, you can't just write books like that and then, since nobody can fact check you, it's true, you know? Civil and ecclesiastical power is united in the same person. Long wars break out between the civilized and the barbarous. Extensive military fortifications, watchtowers, biblical term, of course. Barbarous exterminate the civilized. Discusses the United States. So this brings us to the mound builder myth, and maybe we'll do another video on the mound builder myth, although other people have covered it better than I will. I just want to say one thing about this. It's likely that Joseph Smith was not copying View of the Hebrews. It's likely that that both Ethan Smith, who wrote View of the Hebrews, and Joseph Smith were contemplating the same questions that were kind of being thrown around in the culture, questions that we could now relate to: where did COVID originate? How deadly is COVID-19? What is the best way to be treated for COVID? Imagine that these cultural questions that almost don't even feel you have to reach very far for them. They're right on the tip of your kind of social and cultural contact points. Imagine that two guys decide to write books about those questions. It's not weird that their books came out to be so similar. It doesn't mean that one of them was copying from the other. The most likely scenario is that both were simply answering these questions that were being asked so commonly. And so the mound builder myth is essentially, where did all of this tribal paraphernalia come from? Where are these mounds from? Who made them? We don't see the people, the Native Americans who are living here now doing this stuff. So who did it? And so the mound builder myth is simply, there must have been a race of people who lived here before who were super, super smart, really sophisticated. They did all this stuff, and then these weird savages who are living here now killed them all. It doesn't even make sense logically, because if the one society is way more sophisticated, then it would have wiped out the other one. So that doesn't even make sense kind of as a premise, but whatever. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about, why is talking about any of this important to me, and do I actually have any Mormon street cred? I brought, so it's show and tell today, and I brought something that's kind of fun. So these are my mission scriptures. I served in Huancayo, Peru from 2014 to 2016. I was a zone leader for like a while. I eventually did become assistant. And yeah, I took this stuff pretty seriously. I would like to show you my mission scriptures and just how crazily I studied them. Now, I don't know how well this is going to come across, but this is just like a page. Like, I've just flipped to a page in the Book of Mormon in my Spanish scriptures. Here's another page. Here are more pages. I'm going to insert some B-roll of just what these look like. Okay, but hopefully you can see that I actually did study the hell out of this book. And I've put like, so in my head, this Alma 13:12 really reminded me of Alma 23:6. So I put a little sticky note. I would write as small as I could on the top, on the sticky part of sticky notes. I would write as small as I could scriptures that I was reminded of by the other scriptures, and then I would stick them in the margins here. So there's one, there are two. or I would just write it myself, but I kind of like the color difference. Every single one of these colors that you see, by the way, means a different thing. And yeah, this is just, just my mission scriptures. So I did actually take this book really, really seriously, and I did study it a lot. And I can honestly say that as soon as I had left my mission and I was able to study good books again, even when I was a fully believing member, it was really hard for me to plug back into the Spanish or the English version of this book, because I actually did find it to be so incredibly boring compared to actually good books. So I hope that this hasn't come across as the ramblings of a man drifting into insanity. As Lehi would say, I am a visionary man. But more importantly than that, I kind of want to... I think that it's important that we dismantle all of the conditioning and all of the premises that have been planted into our minds by the LDS Church. And while so many people are doing an incredible job of dismantling the truth claims of the LDS Church and the Book of Mormon specifically, I don't find a lot of people just talking about it culturally, and I don't find a lot of people talking about it just from a flat literature perspective. And so I hope that together, as we work through this series, this is helpful for people. I don't know how I'm supposed to end these sorts of things. I feel like I, for a moment there, had a quick idea, but I think I'll just cut to the B-roll of my mission scriptures right now, and maybe I'll cut the fact that I'm talking, or maybe I'll just leave it. But until next time, thank you for watching. Take care, everybody. Be good.